Now in Oslo, the moment to raise the issue of recognition had come. The Israeli found Abu Ala in a small drawing room.
Abu Ala was leaning on a stick, like this. He raised his eyes to me, and I asked him, "How are you?" And he said, "Very bad, very bad."
I wasn't acting. I was genuinely angry. If you've been negotiating for 6 or 7 months, and people suddenly start coming up with new ideas, it's impossible to go on.
I said, "Listen, Abu Ala, if we can't have our modest agreement, let's go for something really big." He looked up and said, "What do you mean?"
Uri raised the idea of mutual recognition between the PLO and the Israeli government. He dictated some conditions.
The main points were that the PLO would recognize Israel's right to exist, renounce terrorism and violence, and change the PLO charter to reflect the new reality.
I said, "Listen, if you persuade Mr. Arafat to accept all these conditions, I promise I'll try to persuade our Prime Minister and our Foreign Minister to recognize the PLO."
And then these two gentlemen, Uri Savir and Abu Ala, came suddenly bursting out of the room, laughing and joking, and they had solved a basic problem.
It was the breakthrough they were looking for. It seemed the PLO would now become an official partner in the peace process.
Who knows? If they will elect me, I will be the president again of this Palestinian state. If not, I would like to return back to work as a civil engineer.
It was now up to Prime Minister Rabin to decide whether to accept the Oslo Agreement. His chief military advisor argued instead for a deal with Syria.
I advised him to try for peace with Syria first, and then go to the Palestinians. Peace with Syria would bring the Arab-Israeli conflict to an end.
If Syria could be persuaded to sign a peace treaty, its client state, Lebanon, would follow, and the Palestinians and Jordan would have little choice but to fall in line.
It was in the interest of both us and the Syrians, and it would reduce the Palestinian scope for haggling.
An agreement with Syria will make a positive strategic difference to Israel. An agreement with the Palestinians would just be public relations.
Since the Six-Day War in 1967, Israel had occupied a strategic corner of Syria, the Golan Heights, overlooking northern Israel. Successive Israeli leaders had refused to withdraw without peace.
We know that Syria would not make a deal with Israel, would not make peace with Israel for less than full withdrawal. And of course, for any Israeli prime minister, for Rabin in particular, to make the decision to go for full withdrawal was agonizing, was wrenching. But before making the decision, that prime minister had to know what was being given in return, what the Syrian package consisted of.
At this moment, a new American Secretary of State came to Jerusalem.
We were trying to give some propulsion, some momentum to the track involving the Syrians.
Christopher came to meet with Rabin.
The four of us came into the room and sat clustered around around a small table. And after some give and take, Rabin suddenly surprised us all with a very dramatic gambit.
He did give me a very important message to take to Syria, to take to President Assad, and that was, he said, ask Assad if I am able to give him what he needs, will he really go all out for peace?
In other words, if Rabin withdrew from the Golan Heights, would President Assad accept alternative ways to safeguard Israel's border? Would Syria agree to full peace, stop support of terrorism from Lebanon, and establish diplomatic and trade relations with Israel?
Christopher left the room with the knowledge that I think he was holding a very significant mandate in his pocket.
When he arrived in Damascus, Christopher presented Israel's offer of withdrawal to President Assad.
His mistrust of the Israelis was such that he always took every concept and turned it over and looked at it from all different sides, and that's what he was doing with the concept of withdrawal. And he did it by asking me questions, not impolite questions, but very aggressive questions. Now you have to tell me, Mr. Christopher, what the Prime Minister means by withdrawal. That's just an empty term. I really know what it means.
Christopher then shuttled back to Jerusalem.
I met with the Prime Minister again. He was disappointed that Assad had not been more forthcoming, had not shown more appreciation for Rabin's willingness to consider full withdrawal.
On almost every detail, there was an essentially negative answer or an answer that suggested that a very protracted process of bargaining would have to begin.
Rabin could not wait for President Assad. He had promised his voters a peace agreement within a year. So he now settled for the deal that was available, with the PLO in Oslo. But premature disclosure could ditch the deal, and the media were getting close to the story.
Is the stage being set for a meeting between yourself and the PLO leadership, perhaps even with Arafat himself?
Not in the foreseeable future.
Before the next election, at least?
I hope not.
Rabin had to act fast. He gave the go-ahead to Foreign Minister Shimon Peres.
Shimon Peres told me, Yoel, take all your documents, come with me, we're going to conclude the agreement.
Peres set off for Scandinavia. To clinch the deal, he needed a smokescreen. He met Norwegian Foreign Minister Johan Holst secretly in Stockholm and asked him to be his mouthpiece in case anyone was listening in as they telephoned Arafat in Tunis.
I called Arafat and I got him immediately on the line, and I told him that in the code we used at the time, Abu Ammar, which is Arafat's nom de guerre, I have the two fathers here. That was the code for foreign ministers. My father and the other father. And he immediately understood what I meant. And I said, and they want to finish everything tonight.
We went through the last disputed points, one by one.
The phone's loudspeaker was turned on, so all of us could hear Holst on the other end.
I was listening in for perhaps 4 or 5 hours.
At around midnight, Shimon Peres went to sleep. And he told me, if you need my approval, if you want to go beyond the general instructions that we have agreed on with Rabin back at home, wake me up.
At issue were the withdrawal of Israel's military government and how and when they would deal with difficult issues like Jerusalem.
Twice, I had to wake Shimon Peres up.
The second and last time he woke Peres up was over the issue of who would control the bridges between the West Bank and Jordan.
We wanted to be able to control people entering and exiting from the autonomous areas to see that they are not, concealing weapons and the like.
We wanted the crossing points to be under our control.